If you don't look at it, know the quality herbs and put it yourself here, the buck stops with you. And you never worry about how much it costs. You've got to worry about how good the formula is, because if you get people better, they never care how much it cost. But if you don't get them better, they always remember how much it cost. So you go for quality. And we learned everything by counterindication and by mistakes. He said, you got to learn the brakes before you learn the gas. Yeah, it's good for this and this and this and this. But what could go wrong? What could go wrong?
I'm Michael Max, and this is Geological, the podcast that curates East Asian medicine and methods through the power of conversation. I had a teacher who was brilliant in knowing how to say just enough and nothing more. There's a power to communication when the listener fills in the last part of what you really want them to hear. I was in herb clinic in my second year of school. Yeah, that's like a quarter century ago, and I remember this like it was yesterday. I think in part because I still work on gaining a modicum of competence with something that this teacher had an easy mastery with. He had a way of gently shutting down a patient's resistance to following his instructions with herbs and getting them back on track with an interview when they took a hard left turn into something unrelated. This lesson came as a patient was going on about a cousin and something this cousin said about herbs and what she should take and not and on and on. This teacher paused as a way to garner her attention and simply said, not asked, said, "Oh, your cousin has experience with Chinese herbs." Simple statement, not accusatory, not a question, just a part of the conversation. The brilliant part was after the patient said, "No, she doesn't know anything about Chinese herbs." He just continued along with the interview. No recognition or confirmation that the patient was listening to uninformed advice. No need to punctuate the matter, just on to the next thing. Today, I still marvel at this brilliant bit of gong fu. I've used it too over the years, and to good effect. But the beauty of this is not that it's a kind of Jedi mind trick, but that it's a glimpse into the way that we make meaning. And you don't need to clobber people over the head with heavy-handed fact-checking. A simple and gentle statement about something the patient can recognize as not true will effectively change their thinking. It's helpful to learn what our teachers know, but it's a different kind of instruction to notice what it is that they do. Learning the medicine and then learning to engage a practice, it's a tall order and a lot of responsibility. Some of it attitude, some of it knowing the basics of how to run a business. And then there's that indescribable something that rhymes with determination and not taking no for an answer. Those early practitioners in our field certainly had a whopping dose of determination. I often come away from conversations with them thinking that the challenges of their day, while they did cause problems, it was also a kind of fuel for overcoming the limits that they faced. You'll certainly hear about that in this conversation with Holly Guzman. Like all the early practitioners, hers is a story of stubborn curiosity. And while there were challenges in terms of licensure and practice, there was something about being caught up in the early wave of energy that was rolling through the culture at that moment when acupuncture was emerging into the mainstream. It's a long way from Kabul to Guangzhou, and that's just part of the journey. We'll get into it right after a few words from the folks who generously make it possible for you to enjoy Geological. We are grateful to the sponsors who support Geological. Here's a preview of solutions our sponsors have for you. Mayway Herbs helps you care for your patients in the spring season with formulas for seasonal allergies and dermatological conditions. Round Cups Yeah, they have their place, but Fascia Buddies square cups interact with fascial planes in a whole different way. Later in the show, you'll hear why Jane is my favorite EMR with their extensive feature list and ability to customize to your unique clinic. And Blue Poppy reminds us there's no such thing as a small detail. Your focus and intention are important. Do be sure to visit the sponsors page on the Geological website to take advantage of all the special offers for listeners of the podcast. How many times have you opened your podcast feed and felt that little spark of delight seeing a new Geological episode? Imagine being part of what makes that possible. Just a few dollars a month helps to keep the wisdom and the connection alive for all of us. Visit our website and help support the podcast that helps to support you.
Hi folks, I'm Yvonne Lau, president of Mayway Herbs. As we move into March and transition to spring, many patients begin experiencing seasonal allergies. This month, we're highlighting classical and modern formulas for rhinitis, congestion, and phlegm patterns, along with comparison charts to support clear formula differentiation in the clinic. Later in the month, we'll shift our focus to seasonal skin conditions and practical pattern-based treatment strategies as wind in both an environmental and TCM sense begins to stir. Also, enjoy a special 2-part conversation between Dr. Skye Sturgeon and myself on our podcast, Chinese Medicine Matters, in which we have a fun and at times deep, but definitely informative chat about yin and yang. Since 1969, Mayway Herbs has supported practitioners with high-quality herbal products and trusted educational resources. Learn more at Mayway.com. We wish you and your patients a smooth and healthy transition into spring, and thanks for supporting real Chinese medicine.
If you believe plastic cups don't compare to glass cups, and if we're talking the usual round plastic cups, I would agree. Hi, I'm John Stan, inventor of the Fascia Buddy square cupping system. Our square cups change the mechanics of cupping and how you engage tissues and channels. Fascia doesn't organize itself in circles, it transmits force along lines and planes. And sinew channels? Well, they travel in pathways too. Our square cups sit edge to edge, allowing practitioners to build continuous decompression chains that follow those lines across the body. As Matt Callison states in his review, quote, I am a fire cupping advocate and still use the traditional cupping system frequently. However, Fascia Buddy uses square plastic cups uniquely designed to be placed side by side, creating an effective chain to match the contours of the body like no other system I've seen. End of quote. To read the full review, visit fasciabuddy.com/testimonials, and while you're there, explore the distributor page to expand your cupping treatment options today.
Holly Guzman, welcome to Geological.
Thank you, Max. Happy to be here.
Happy to have you here. So this is a little history series conversation. You've been at acupuncture for a few days or so. I always like to start these things off with a little trip in the Wayback Machine. And if you're old enough to know what the Wayback Machine is, then you were probably back, in the early days of acupuncture. I'm like so amazed at you guys that somehow found out about this acupuncture stuff, somehow found out how to use it, brought it forward, created an industry, created a profession. Like, what on earth was going on in your life? And for that matter, what was going on in the world around you when you first bumped up against acupuncture? And what was your response to it?
Well, I think it was truly unique, and it was probably not happening on Earth. It must have been happening in heaven, because I was in Afghanistan as the child, one of 4 children of Peace Corps volunteers. I think our family was the last family that they were allowed into the Peace Corps for various reasons. But I was in the American International School of Kabul at age 13 or so. I had to do a term paper. And so I was at the table with my siblings, and I said, I got to write on the typewriter without making any mistakes, 20 pages or so on some subject. And I'm not quite sure what I want to do it on. And my brother said to me, oh, do it on acupuncture. And I said, what the heck is that? And he said, oh, they stick needles in people, my older brother. And I went, like voodoo? And he said, no, it helps them. And I said, what? Anyway, so that was my introduction on planet Earth, like probably who gets introduced to it that way. But at that time in Afghanistan,
You do. And here's the follow-up to that. How the heck did your brother know about acupuncture?
well, we lived across the street from the Chinese embassy. And we also had the Russian embassy and everybody and the American embassy and all the people that we were all going to school together with the upper class from Kabul, because I could have gone to a community high school there, but a religious one or whatever. But I was trying to be able to integrate back into high school in the United States eventually. So all three countries were trying to build roads. It was a triangle. There's 3 roads in Afghanistan. One of them the Russians were building, one the Americans were building, one the Chinese were building. And they all kind of went, a triangle in the middle of the country to Herat and down to Kandahar. So I went over to the Chinese embassy and knocked on the door. But I believe my brother knew, because one of his friends had been very much helped by the acupuncturist, Kabul, that was helping quite a few people. And it turned out that he had helped my friend's mom, who was in a wheelchair after an automobile accident, and got her up and walking again. And the priest in town had some very painful nerve disease, and that he was able to get rid of. And when I went to the Chinese embassy to say, hi, do you have anything to tell me about acupuncture? They gave me a little pamphlet about a hero in China that had figured out how to help deaf-mute kids hear and speak. And that got my attention. And the story in the book was that mute gate, which is due 15, is a point that was forbidden, and especially to needle deep. And this upright hero, citizen of China, had decided that he was going to experiment on himself to make sure that some of the old rules about what was forbidden were something that we could possibly enter into a new future without having as many superstitions. And so he put that needle deep into his own mute gate due 14, and he felt his larynx warm and vibrating, and he didn't die. And he thought maybe he could do something with that. And he began to. And from there, he was able to actually help a bunch of kids. So I thought, well, that's astounding. What is this stuff, and why don't we use it? So those were some of my initial thoughts. Fast forward, I ended up being able to join a group that was going to China, thanks to my mom, who kept her ear out in the world and knew at that point I was actually, this is quite a bit forward because there's a little bit in between those two pieces of information. But right as the red curtain came up, the very first people in the United States they just wanted to go to China so bad. Some journalists that worked with the New York Times, some people who had been studying communism for quite a while, they just really wanted to go. But how do you get a visa? And they thought, well, we got to get a group that they can't deny. We're never going to get in as individuals, but in China, you can get in as a group. What group could that be? Oh, community, student, volunteers. That sounds good. We called ourselves something like the Garden of Learning, and became a group of 15 kids that actually were like the cover for these other chaperones to get into China. So they wanted to know if I'd ever been a student and if I'd ever done anything volunteer in the community. And I was like, yes, that's me. I think I was 17. Yes, I was 17 at the time. And so I joined the group. And the deal was we had to earn enough money, all of us, that we could all go. And so we were doing what kids do to make sure that all or none could make this trip. And we each got to decide where we wanted to go when we got to China. And the first person said, I want to go see the Great Wall. And the next one said, oh, I want to see the glass animal factory. And then nobody else had any ideas. But I'd already commandeered my best friend, Jenny, who had been studying acupuncture because her mom and brother had been to Worsley School in England. She was too young to learn, and we were learning together. And that's a whole nother story, a good one. But anyway, so
Wait a minute. So you and your friend Jenny are already learning some acupuncture.
Oh, yeah. Oh, we're deep in.
At
On our own.
At age 17.
Age 17. So that's why I should go back a little between these two events. But I was trying to tie them together another way. And so then we said, well, where do you guys want to go? And we actually hijacked the entire trip. And the places we went were the school in Guangzhou, Canton, which is famous for treating deaf mutes. Guess who thought that up and wanted to go, right? We also wanted to go see the barefoot doctor training, and we wanted to see acupuncture anesthesia, and we wanted to see where they grew the herbs in the botanical gardens, and we wanted to see that, right? And so they ended up taking us all over China on this tour that Jenny and I had heavily lobbied for in our group to see the stuff that we wanted to see.
Helps to know what you want.
Right? And how I got hooked up with Jenny was because when I got back to the United States, it wasn't like I was sure I was going to be an acupuncturist. I had thought it was interesting. And diverge a little bit here, one of the other things I was interested in was building violins, making violins. I had an apprenticeship with a violin maker. I was playing fiddle at the time. And later on, much later on, Robert Fenwick, famous astrologer of 9 stars in Chinese medicine, was looking at my chart and he says, "Oh, in career down here, it's very interesting. You sort of are under the princess star, and she does sort of like odd occupations with that the princess doesn't really have a job, but she's supposed to do something important. And it's often something with like fine needlework or sometimes like musical instruments."
Okay.
So that's why I said, how do we come up with this stuff, right? So anyway, I was not sure if I wanted to do acupuncture or for violin making, but I went to San Francisco and I went to the only store in Chinatown that had any English books at all that I knew of, called the East West Bookstore. And I found the only book that there was on acupuncture, and I stood by it and I hung out in the bookstore for quite a while until somebody came and picked up that book, and I jumped on him. And I said, "What do you know about acupuncture? How come you're looking about this book?"
Oh my God, you were spying, you were stalking people.
I was stalking.
Do you remember which book it was?
Yes, it's that green book, The Outline of Acupuncture. And it had been published by then. This is 4 or 5 years into my interest in acupuncture.
And you're waiting for someone to come along and pick that book up. That's very tricky.
Yes, in Chinatown in San Francisco.
Uh-huh.
Right? And they stepped back and they were like, "No, who are you? Where are you?" I said, "Listen, I'm 15 years old. I'm not with the FBI. I simply want to know," because it's illegal. It's very illegal. "If anybody around here knows anything about this, and I'm in Chinatown, what can you tell me? Why you got this book?" And they said, "I'm going to give you a phone number." And they gave me a phone number of Ephraim, and I called him up, Ephraim Korngold, and he said, "How old are you? You probably want to talk to my kid's sister. She also is interested. Here's her phone number." And so I went to the mission. I called her up. "Jenny, you don't know me, but I want to learn acupuncture." She said, "Oh, come on over." And she gave me her address, and I knocked on her door in the mission. And she opened it up, and she had the Canadian course from the Yellow Emperors through the Canadian correspondence course. And she just was standing there, and she shoved it into my hands, and she said, "Oh, look, read this. I have something."
Wow. Ephraim's little sister.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
It's hilarious. So Jenny and I ended up on this trip to China together
Oh
2
my
years later.
God. Yeah, you two were a force of nature, I would imagine.
We were age 17, and she's 3 years older than me, so she was 19. Anyway, off we went. And in all of that, as I had been trying to learn it and then got into China, what happened for me, which was significant, is that I got to see the deaf mute school, and it blew my mind because it was so real with the acupuncture. What was happening there was that kids who couldn't hear and couldn't speak, and so they had muted voices the way it is, there was lots of them from all over the country, and they were getting acupuncture daily, and they were integrating into a group that was learning to hear and speak. We could tell as we got into the older groups. And if you got good, they wouldn't release you, because they said if you take out all the people that are succeeding and only leave the people that are having a hard time, you can't move everybody forward as well. And they would start out with lip readers, and then in the older classes, the teacher would have a book in front of her face so that you couldn't read her lips. And the kids' voices were getting clearer and clearer in terms of sounding like they could hear themselves. And I was like, oh, they can do this. That thing that happened to me in junior high is not made up. I'm experiencing it. I see it. It's real. We got to do this. And that's the power of exposure and the power of seeing something that becomes more than just imagination. But you have to start with imagination to even be able to get to new concepts.
Isn't it true? That is so true.
Yes.
You have to start with imagination to get to new concepts.
Yes. And I just heard a talk by Jeffrey Yuen on anxiety. And he said, in order to get out of anxiety, it's very important that people can imagine not being anxious. If they can't imagine it, it's very hard to get there. And there's many ways to help people imagine it. And one of them is theater, where you imagine you're somebody else. And it's very therapeutic, etc. It was a great lecture by Jeffrey. And it confirmed this aspect I have of wanting people to be exposed. As acupuncture practitioners, students, lineage, getting exposed to what's possible is such a lighting up of our capacity to imagine us being able to help the world do it, have this medicine work. And I've had such broad, wild, pre-conventional exposures, as many people have. And then passing some of those on is something which is sometimes enough exposure itself and sometimes enhances other people's expansion. Some of the things that I have helped me were things that were way non-conventional, but even Ted, when he was first teaching at the New England School, which I got to shortly after it started, you can imagine I was ready.
Yeah, try to stop you.
Right? And he brought up a couple of things. One was like case studies, and some of his case studies were wild in terms of being old and how people did things. And they had one book was just about using do 14 as like the answer. Like you could use 1 point on over for a whole lot of uncurable things, and you could end up doing what hadn't been able to be done by another acupuncturist or by herbs with 1 point. I was like, oh, that's actually like a cool concept to see a case study book about and read about these outcomes. And the thing that Ted also really imbued me with was that storytelling is Chinese medicine. And he did case studies that were sort of like old shamans that were like rabbis who did storytelling in order to help their patient change. And I was like, okay, that's basic human nature. But it validated my own inclination to tell stories and wonder if that was like out of scope or if I was being some sort of a deviant. And what you learn more and more is like, no, fits. It is who we are. We do get to do that. It is the way that we get to talk about ourselves with our patients, totally ethically.
Do you know who Milton Erickson was?
I don't.
Milton Erickson was a psychotherapist back in the 50s and 60s. And he did hypnotherapy. In fact, there's a whole school of hypnotherapy that came out of his work. He got very good at observing people after being a child stricken with polio, and he couldn't move for a long time. He got very good at observing people, and he would just sit down and have a conversation with people, and their lives would change dramatically.
Absolutely. And I wished I could do that when I was younger, and now I can naturally when I'm older because I have more stories and I'm more ready for it.
Yeah, I don't think you can do it when you're younger.
No.
I think it takes a certain kind of development, because to tell a good story, you got to know what people need to hear.
That's it. And that takes experience, and it's very hard to have any substitute for experience.
Is there a substitute?
Almost. Sometimes it comes through a different way, but basically no. So another exposure I had early on was when I was learning herbs from Dr. Lai, Yat-Kee Lai, who I have worked with some fantastic herbalists, and I hands off to Andy Ellis and Michael Brofman and Jeffrey Yuen, but I don't think I've ever come close to meeting an herbalist as fantastic as Yat-Kee Lai from what I've seen him do and experienced. And when I ended up in California trying to get my license, the year it was legalized, you could get in two ways. You could graduate from a California school and there hadn't been any before that, or you could prove you'd been practicing for 10 years. And I was probably 21. So I've
been practicing since 11. Well, not quite, but you were exposed a little early on.
I couldn't do it. So I had to go to the school, and I'd already been working in the Lemuel Shattuck State Hospital with Ted.
Uh-huh.
And I'd already, gotten through Dr. So's program and was great friends with
Wait a
Kiko.
minute,
And
wait a
I
minute.
was
Dr. So's program. Is this at NISA or is this something else?
NISA.
Okay, so you'd already done NISA.
Oh, yeah.
You went to school at NISA.
I'm just waiting for California to get legal, right? And when it gets
Uh-huh.
there, I can't prove that I know anything. But
Right.
I come and I go to the first school, ACTCM, and I matriculate into the second year. And I'm a little more experienced than anybody else is there in terms of having practiced. But we didn't learn herbs in the 2 years. We learned acupuncture, which is much more traditional in China. You either go to acupuncture school or herbal school, or in Japan, sometimes moxa school, but you don't learn it all at once. So I came back, and Yat Kilai was there trying to teach people herbs at the same time that they were still learning concepts of wind or whatever. And he and Eagle and I all sort of became a group of, we became more his prodigies because I was ready. But what's more important than any of that, I'm rambling, is the way that he taught herbs. And he basically said, do not put them in categories. As soon as you put something in a category, you're putting yourself in a box and you can't think outside of the box. And you think, oh, dong gui is great for blood. But do you remember how good it is for like constipation? Like, don't put it in a box. And don't ever take anything that is already pre-mixed up, because at the end of the day, you're responsible. Do you know what happened in Hong Kong? Do you know exactly how that pill got put together? Are you ready to take the hit? If you don't look at it, know the quality herbs, and put it yourself here, the buck stops with you. And you never worry about how much it costs. You got to worry about how good the formula is, because if you get people better, they never care how much it cost. But if you don't get them better, they always remember how much it cost. So you go for quality.
That makes sense. That really makes sense.
And we learned everything by counterindication and by mistakes. He said, you got to learn the brakes before you learn the gas. Yeah, it's good for this and this and this and this. But what could go wrong? What could go wrong? And he started us right out of the gates by saying, okay, I've made an herb formula for somebody. You've seen it. They're all in Cantonese. We didn't have any books at all. I'm learning herbs by visual and Cantonese. And he would make a formula for somebody who had indigestion or something. And then he'd say, now you make a formula like for the next person that has something like this. Go ahead. And we're like, I know like 2 herbs. Like I just bear like bok soot, which is baijiu, and bok ling. So we would put the formula tentatively in, and then he would say, oh, well, wait a second. In this patient, they have a history of a bladder infection, and if you give them a diuretic, you could actually make that worse. So no, always think about what could go wrong. He said, we came from a long lineage of treating emperors only, and if you make something go wrong in the palace and somebody doesn't do well, your lineage is gone. You're done. Don't kill the princess.
This episode is brought to you by Jane, a practice management software and EMR designed to help practitioners run their business without running around. Managing a practice can mean juggling more tools than you ever planned to. One for booking, one for documentation, another for billing. Each solves a small part of the puzzle, but because they don't work together, the manual admin still adds up. Jane helps practitioners connect their core tools all in one place. Payments are taken and recorded directly into Jane. Jane Websites helps new patients find your clinic online, and if something needs attention, Jane's support team is available by phone, email, or chat with an understanding of how your entire system works together. For added peace of mind, Jane includes privacy and security features like 2-step verification, role-based access levels, and HIPAA and PPDA compliance, so you can feel confident your practice and patients' data are protected. To learn more about how Jane can support you, your patients, and your business, head to jane.app/demo. And if you're ready to get started, you can use the code CHIOLOGICAL for a 1-month grace period on your new Jane account. First thing, don't have bad side effects.
No matter what, right?
That's really interesting. Very defensive in a way, but at the same time, it will make you, it really is a whole different way of approaching the study and understanding and the practice. Talk about do no harm. Yeah, because you could lose your damn head.
Yeah. So I learned what's wrong with every herb. And I learned them with no categories, no pre-made formulas, absolutely individual what fits that person in Cantonese. And then I had to learn, of course, characters so that you could write the formula, and then pinyin so you could talk to anybody else, and eventually Latin and pharmaceutical names until Subhuti came along and we needed to do common names like him and Suntan. Anyway, but that was my first exposure to how you cook.
Again, I'm really struck. Wow, no categories. Tell me more about like how you would approach it without the framework of categories. And I get it. I get the thing about the problem with putting things in a box is then you become habituated to putting things in a box. And when you attempt to put patients in a box, that it cuts off all kinds of possibilities.
Yeah. Eventually, I could put them all in categories easily. And we did eventually have to have some system besides paper bags all over the clinic that we were like ruffling through. So we did make beautiful herb drawers and put them into areas. But that was not the importance of the herb, like which meridians it entered or something like that. It wasn't the way that I learned herbalism. I learned it the way you learn the spices in your cupboard. And you're like, oh, look, here's cardamom. It goes in cookies, but it also goes in Mediterranean cooking. What do you know about it? Where do you put it on your shelf? Right?
Right. That's cool.
Yeah. Other things that were true for me when I began acupuncture, was that I felt like, why do it? And when I was in college, I remember thinking really clearly to myself, I was doing, would you imagine, independent study in acupuncture at UCSC and taking Chinese and physiology and anatomy, anything that those things.
You built yourself an acupuncture program.
Independent study. What do you want to, I thought it was going to be neurobiology or something, but psychobiology. I don't know, because I had to name something, but actually.
Of course.
Anyhow.
But you were using it as your live lab in a way to get access to the thing that you loved.
Absolutely. And I was thinking, why do I want to do this? And the answer was really clear to me. And because you want to make a difference in the world and you want to make people feel better. But really, it was much more profound than that. And I think that it came from other aspects of my background. I felt like people would make good choices in their lives if they felt well, they could come from their higher self. And that politically, when you have people that are really doing things that are crazy, mean, angry, I don't think of that as true human nature. And I thought if I could just help people feel more balanced, that they would be able to make more balanced decisions in politics.
And be more effective.
Yes. And I also felt we had to have access for people that I never wanted to charge more than $5. I couldn't imagine it because I was a very poor student. There was no student loans at that time, and you did have to come up with tuition. So I had a lot of financial creativity in terms of how hard I worked.
How did you manage that? What did you do?
I went to Alaska in the summers and worked 18-hour days where you get overtime after the first 3 days. You sleep by a lake where it's raining all the time in your tent, and you get a job out on the island if you can, and you come home with tuition so that you can do shiatsu while you're living in the house you were living in the projects in Edge of Brookdale, ride your bicycle to the New England School of Acupuncture in the snow at night, and pay and still be able to cover your rent $50 a month, because I lived in the attic where you didn't have to stand up everywhere with other acupuncture students. Like, I eventually moved Kiko into our house, and Tom Ryamaki was there, gotten his first case of needles from Japan and wanting to start the Oriental Medical Supplies. And when that word was not politically upsetting, OMS.
No, it was descriptive.
Yeah. So I worked and I made it happen.
And you were dedicated. You put your heart into it.
Yeah. And I loved being outside in nature, and I was young. You know what I had? The advantage I had was that I was young and I didn't have a lot of ties to material objects or relationships or kids. I was still able to do incredible things, which are very unusual once I'm older. So that opened a lot of chances for me. But in that political way, later on, I heard Jeffrey Yuen tell a story many people I'm sure have heard, which is just that in China, at one point in history, when scholars took the exam in order to see if they could become part of the bureaucracy and work in the government. And if they had been educated that far and they failed the exam, then they were allowed to at least be doctors. That was what they got for failing.
It was a fallback.
Yes, because they were educated.
Consolation prize.
They were educated enough, but they couldn't be a part of the ruling class. And they were probably more influential in politics than any of the bureaucrats were who ruled out of a certain kind of like distance and dogma. But the doctors were who you listened to because they would tell you what to do, what to eat, how you should live, and how you should act in order to protect yourself and your family from the bad spirits, if nothing else, the pernicious influences. So they actually were a lot of the drive of change in culture.
That's interesting. You know, whenever something's decreed, some people will go along with it. Others, they'll just resist it. But if somebody's actually helping you and you're connected to them and you have a personal relationship, yeah, that person is going to be way more influential.
Absolutely.
A little subversive in a way.
Yes. In fact, Michael Turk, who wrote the book Pain's Healing Secret, has an introduction in there about World War II and the practitioner who was using Chinese medicine and was helping Hitler's henchmen, like the guy that was the strategist, and who had awful stomach pain. And he was able to help him. And then he came back with another bout of awful stomach pain right before they were going to isolate the Netherlands and annihilate it in terms of a bridge they were going to take out, and the strategy where, you know, Anne Frank had been, and I'm Dutch, so it means a lot. And he bargained with him and he said, I'll stop your pain and I'd like you to not invade the Netherlands that way. And that bargain was made, and it changed my culture, if not other very significant outcomes. It's a beautiful story that Michael tells about the power of helping people with their pain.
Mm-hmm. Which comes back to something you were talking about earlier in this conversation about the power of story.
Yes. Yeah.
So you do this, the program at NISA, you find ways of raising the money, you are young and vital, and you are dedicated. Nothing like being young and vital and dedicated. You know, you can get a lot done. It's harder when you're 30. It's worse when you're 40. And it goes downhill from there. But from NISA, you go back out to California, to San Francisco. What took you to San Francisco?
That's my home stomping grounds. I wanted to come home.
Okay, hometown. You're going back home.
That's where I met. Jenny was in San Francisco. That's San Francisco, Chinatown. I'm a kid from there. My parents had wanted to get me out of the Bay Area, get out of Dodge, because, you know, their friends had gone to the Gold Coast and Ghana with their kids and come back with a little bit better sense of the world. And my sense of the world was such that I knew from living in Kabul what it is to be having people that are disabled and begging on the streets as you grow up. It's a different place than Marin County, I'll tell you. And it was very free when I was there. I used to just roam in the Hindu Kush, those mountains that go up towards Everest, where the crossroads of Asia, the little rope bridges that go between China and Russia over the gorges up there. And I was a free spirit. And I did not feel oppressed in that country, but there was certainly a lot of financial oppression. And later on, when I was in China the first time, because I did go back for an extended period of time with another great adventures. But when I was there the first time, and I was 17, I decided I wanted to stay. And I could.
In China?
Yeah. A communist China suited me fine.
What year is this?
77?
Early.
A gang of 4 were the first people in there. The people have absolutely no choice the way that we value independence and choice in the U.S. Those are two things that are very basic human like fears, is that you're going to lose your independence or you're not going to have any choice. This whole culture was living with what we don't consider to be any choice. They couldn't decide who they married or how many kids to have or what cement building to live in or what their career or job was going to be or what clothes to wear because there was one outfit or pretty much anything. What food to buy because you had a few chits to buy the only things that were available. But they only had one thing that they could have their choice about, and that was who they were and their spirits. And it was almost like being the relief when you're in like a Catholic school and everybody has the same skirt and you don't have to act richer or poorer or like you know the right brand or you can pick the, right? Externally to represent something as a poser or whatever. You only had one thing. And that was how you acted, who you were, how you expressed yourself in the world. And it was so rich for me and so valuable that I just wanted to be there.
That's fascinating. Here you are, a very free and wild-spirited American young woman. You go to the opposite and you find a certain kind of freedom of spirit.
They didn't have the beggars on the streets who were disabled in rags, crying for pennies. Something had changed in their culture. For me, having grown up in another area in Asia, it was heavy.
So what brought you back? Why not stay?
They laughed at me even considering as a minor American that I wanted to stay in China. Are you laughing now? Yeah, right, honey.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yes, that'll be enough now. So no, I had to go back on my own in another incredible quest. So anyway,
But it made an impression. It really made an impression on you.
on a soul level of what are we afraid of and who are we trying to be and who is a person and how do they express that? You have the basics all covered in a relatively dependable way, which I guess was also because I didn't have a very dependable basics in any way. And I knew I could strive for them.
Yeah. I had such a different experience. I was there in the early 2000s, and I remember I was working in a clinic for a little while. I befriended a Chinese doctor at one of the markets and ended up I actually had a job. I had an illegal job working as an acupuncturist in a private Chinese clinic, which was fascinating. But, well, there's two things I remember about that. One is that they had the Three Stooges on the TV there, which was just hilarious to me. And the second was my friend was an herbalist, but they had an acupuncturist working there. And I remember getting a treatment from her and then offering her a treatment. And she goes, "Oh, no, I don't get acupuncture." I'm like, "Well, you're an acupuncturist. You do acupuncture. You don't get acupuncture? Like, what are you doing as an acupuncturist?" And she goes, "That's what they told me I was going to do. And that's what I do. That's it. I don't get acupuncture. I have no interest in it." I was like, "Oh, okay. I am in a foreign country. That's right. Don't forget."
When I got back here to ACTCM, one of the things that I did was I wanted to work with Miriam Lee. And Miriam Lee was the person in California who didn't start acupuncturist until she was in her late 40s. That's when she began to learn it. She'd been a midwife in China and she came here. And so I always thought, wow, you can start at any age because of Miriam.
Mm-hmm.
And she also said she was jailed, I think, 7 times for practicing medicine without a license and eventually pardoned by Jerry Brown. And then he legalized acupuncture because it was the right thing to do. But each time they'd take her out of jail, they'd say, well, just don't practice acupuncture without a license. As all of us pioneers well know how that was before there were licenses. And all the people who do it by donation and who did it in, other ways. And she'd say, I don't work for the government. I work for God. And if people have pain, I have the power to stop it. I am going to.
Nope, I'm not going to quit.
That's a different kind of a politician. That's who is deciding what our laws are? Who decides what's right? How do you know that you're walking in truth? Right?
There's your doctor's influencer.
Yeah, that's it.
Did you practice illegally?
No, because yes. I remember in Boston, living in the attic, having a guy come to me with elbow pain, and I didn't charge him any money because that's the way that you don't get your future messed up. But right? And I think it's the way that a lot of people practiced. I remember Ted had a donation bowl in his hallway at the front door when I was working with him in his home. And I couldn't get his elbow better. I did all the things Dr. So showed us on the right channels, and I gave him 3 treatments or something, and his elbow wasn't any better. And so I said, I shouldn't be doing this. I'm not good enough yet, right? Like, I'm referring you on in some way. And he said, oh no, I want to keep coming. And at that moment, I realized the thing that eventually we learn in acupuncture, which is often they get better in so many other ways that have nothing to do with their complaint, that your audacity to kick them out of their healing process because your goal was different is something to really consider.
It is something, but often those goals are unstated, right? They come in, well, I got this elbow pain. I want my elbow pain fixed. There may be something behind the elbow pain. There often is, or there's some other things that are going on. So, I mean, I get it. Working on the elbow's not working, but make the frame a little larger. So what are you getting from this? What else was he getting from this that kept bringing him back?
Yes, those, right. So you asked me whether I was practicing. I was, no, yes. I mean, like, I was also practicing with Kiko in the Lemuel Shattuck State Hospital. And the first patient I was given came in handcuffs from the county prison, and he was missing from his knee down. And it had started when his toe had been amputated from some infection, and pain had gotten so bad they took him off at the ankle, at which point the pain got worse and they'd taken him off at the knee, and now the guy was just in screaming pain. And he was in his his orange jail suit. And they were like, we want you to help stop his pain. And I was like, oh, okay. First patient, this was not in any of Dr. So's books. That's not my class.
Yeah, guy missing a leg, prisoner missing a leg.
And we stopped his pain. We stopped his pain. And he was able to fit a prosthetic. And acupuncture did it. So you don't know, like, who your clientele is that's like, are they difficult? Are they hard? Do they fit in the box? Elbow pain. I'd seen that one in the books. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So I was talking to Andy Ellis yesterday. He called me. And I mentioned that he said to say hi to you, that he instigated you getting to Taiwan when you did by not telling you the truth on purpose, that you would be fluent in Chinese in 1 year, because he said if it took longer, you wouldn't have gone. So he said what it took to get you to go.
In clinic, there's no such thing as a small detail. The needle you reach for, the formula you prescribe, the moment you choose to listen just a little bit longer. Your patients place their trust in you, and you deserve to place the same trust in the tools that you use. At Blue Poppy, they hold their products to the same standard that you hold your care. Herbal formulas crafted for efficiency, needles that perform the way you expect them to, clinic essentials that arrive on time. Because when your tools are dependable, your focus stays where it belongs, on your patients. No guesswork, no compromises, just steady support behind the scenes. Blue Poppy, the choice of practitioners since 1982. He knew the right thing to say.
Yes.
That was a really strange experience. I'm usually very cognitive when it comes to making decisions. I weigh the pluses and the minuses. Truth is, with that conversation with him, he said you should go to Taiwan and learn some Chinese first. I was already in. It was the weirdest damn thing.
That's like, yeah.
It was the weirdest damn thing.
Yes. Every once in a while, we know that we got what they talk about as being a transmission from some other place than our own brain figuring it out.
I don't know what it was. I've had it happen a handful of times in my life where it's just like, there it is. It's like, yep, that's where it's going. That's where I'm going. That's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Like, how about that?
And we can't really lead anybody to that. And I thought, what am I going to say in this lecture? Because if anybody tried to follow my teaching course or my business model or my anything, like, what's the good of this? But what I do want to say is that something I sort of alluded to at the beginning, which is that Chinese medicine is very important for us all to teach each other because that's how it got this far to where we are. And Kiko said to me at one point, she said, it's very important to have good teachers because you want to get at least that good. But it's really important that we all surpass our teachers. Because if we just stay below them, what direction does the medicine go in?
Yeah, it just ratchets down.
You have to ratchet it up. You actually have to become more than anybody before you in order to do that. And that it's really important that we teach each other everything that we've gotten great insight from. And Andy was agreeing with me. He just said, okay, Holly, just go and teach, because no matter what, I'm not always sure what I'm doing or worth the effort or whatever it is in teaching. I owe it to the profession to just continue to give what I can give and to pass it on so that this great medicine continues to grow and change and expand in all these directions that is hard to get to alone. Thank God for every one of my teachers. I never could have invented Chinese medicine or gotten to where I am. No way.
It's a crowdsourced effort, isn't it?
Yes, completely.
Here's the interesting thing, too. I mean, on one hand, we rely on our teachers. We rely on whatever they got from their teachers. There's very much a historic aspect of whatever has come down to us. But then there's this thing that has to happen where it's got to light up in you somehow. If you're going to make it work and you're going to make a go of it, then it has to light up in you in some way. And I don't know if it's possible for it to sort of kindle in your experience and skill and interest in the work that you do without you adding something to it.
You have to make it your own. It has to be you. It has to be you. And that's what each of us bring to Chinese medicine. And why, when I thought, oh, they should go to somebody else and they still choose me, it's for complex reasons that each of us brings something so unique.
Yeah, I can remember early on wondering why patients are coming to see me. Like, why are you coming to see me? There's all these other much more experienced practitioners out there. I mentioned this to Steve Clavey once, and he had a really insightful answer. He said, when you're beginning and you don't know that much yet, and you spend a lot of time with your patients because you're trying to work it out, and if you still don't get it, you're going to study on their behalf, you're going to attract people who like having attention paid to them. They appreciate that you're going the extra mile with it. As you get better and faster and more facile with it, you'll attract a different crowd. You'll attract the people, they're busy. They want to get in and out and like get me out on time because I got other things to do. And so as we mature as practitioners, we will attract different kinds of people based on what they're looking for. Yep. So there's room for all of us.
Absolutely. And one thing Ted said is later on in his practice, he goes, I don't have any wood patients who are impatient or kind of want to get things done because I never get around to calling people back in time to have those people's attention.
Well, now there's a practice management tip for you.
There you go.
Demanding woody patients. Just call them back a day late.
I'm not sure how much longer we can talk. I have all sorts of things to bring up. We've gone over the clock at this point, and I'm just curious if you have things you want to ask me or if I should go directions I'm inclined or where we are at this great conversation.
What keeps you in it? I know what drew you into it. You've been at it for a long time. Long enough to have, I suspect, different, I'm going to say seasons that you've been through as a practitioner, as a teacher, wife, mother, whatever. I mean, you go through life and there's different themes and aspects to different parts of it. How's practice different at this point than it was, say, 30 years ago? What are your challenges today? What's got your interest? And what are the things that are difficult that you're trying to work out?
I wrote a letter to my patients last fall, and it said, apropos to what you just used in terms of seasons, I feel like I'm in the autumn of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to slow it down. And therefore, I'm really encouraging people to find other practitioners, at least so that I can have, it didn't say this in the letter, but I don't want to be indispensable. There's a lot of indispensable people in the graves, and many of my colleagues have died at ages that are the same or younger than I am now. And I could go through the list of a dozen of our beloveds, and they've been my beloveds too. Lillian Bridges' death was particularly difficult for me because I knew she could make it. I knew she'd helped so many other people get through what she had. And she said to me, don't worry, it'll take me a couple months. I'm going to go inside, but I can do this. And then I got called to her deathbed. So, yeah, at which point I literally fell onto the ground. And then I made it. But my friends are dying, and with very little notice, and who have everything to live for, and who have been so accomplished in their own capacities. So I don't take it for granted at all. And I really haven't ever done anything except for Chinese medicine. I have worked hard my entire life, and that's all I know. So I kind of want to expand out of it a little bit more because I'm enjoying things that I never dreamed I would enjoy, like sitting by the river and watching it go by. I thought, who does that? But now it's great. So I'm embracing another, Lillian said, you get to a certain age and you can't hurry anymore. You can't rush. And it's like, it just happens. And I've been rushing around for a while. So
it's really worked for you too.
Yes.
It's paid off really well.
Yeah. So with that, I'm looking to expand outside of just serving everybody else. I'm working with my own sense of yin chow, yang chow, how I see myself, how I see others, because I think I see others often better than I see myself.
You would not be the first. It's so strangely mysterious. We
No.
live with ourselves, and yet so often we're such mysteries to ourselves.
I think we're all mysteries. It's just how much time you spend, contemplating your own navel and how many other people you can get well that day who it wasn't so much of a mystery for us. It really made a difference. In fact, I need a miracle every day, and I feel like I get one when I work, and it's kind of wonderful. And it's hard to walk away from that because there's a lot of feel good when you turn somebody around from something that has been so difficult for them. So I get more gratification as I have practiced longer because there is something valuable about experience, and it does make a difference. So that's great. And then there's another aspect of life which is also great, and they can both be great. And it depends on how much energy you have, because if you don't have enough energy, neither one of them's so great.
True. Energy changes as we age. Holly, you bring something up. Losing colleagues, people you care about, people in the profession, may be gone before you expected they should. We have this idea of yang sheng. We have this idea that we practice this very holistic medicine. And I know for the longest time, I thought that was going to give me a bit of a bypass on the troubles of aging. And what I've come to discover is it doesn't. Maybe it changes it to a degree. I don't know, because I've lived my life the way that I have. I don't know if I'd be in a different place had I lived it differently. It's hard to know. But for sure, we don't get a pass on the troubles of aging. And I have found for myself that, how do I phrase this? Let me go back a couple of years. COVID, when everything shut down. And I shut my clinic down because I didn't know what was going on. In part, the two, because I work out of my house. I didn't want people coming in. My family lives here. So I shut it down for a couple months. And a couple weeks into it, I had this incredible sense of being unburdened. I mean, it just lifted off and out of me. I was unburdened. It was like, oh, wow, this is great not having to take care of people. And then I got curious about that because I love the work I do and I like taking care of people. and I love practicing acupuncture. But what I realized in that was there's a trade-off. And as much as I enjoy the work, and as good as the work is, and as amazing as Chinese medicine is, I also pay a price as a practitioner. You pay a price. You pay a price with having a heart that cares. You pay a price with working some extra hours. You pay a price with sitting and attending to people. It's not a bad thing, but I think it's there. But I don't hear these conversations in our community of what it takes out of us. It does give us a lot, for sure, but I think it also takes something from us.
We get less of everything as we age. Jeffrey said, yeah, we get less qi, less yin, yes, less yang, less blood. Life is taking it from us. And it's true that wherever we put our focus, there is a loss and a gain. And the hardest things that I have done, I've always gotten more from than I gave.
Yeah, I'd have to say I've had that too. The hardest things I've done, I've gotten a lot more from it. And just in time, there's going to be a loss because it's unavoidable.
Yeah.
Maybe a little more time by the riverside.
Yeah. And that may not be my largest gain. We'll see.
I find I need to rest more and that I appreciate that downtime, though.
Absolutely.
I've noticed that over time.
Autumn is its own New Year's, as the Jewish would say, and that there's something to going inward too.
Yeah, it's a weird time to have your New Year, isn't it?
No, it's the metal element. Doesn't all the young meridians start with that?
Now that you mention it, I hadn't thought about it that way.
The metal element in Chinese medicine is something that I think is particularly poorly transmitted or talked about. I've come up with my own idea about it, which is definitely not in the old classics, but comes from the character, which the character for gold and the character for metal is also the character that I see symbolizing the periodic table. It's things that can't be reduced any further, that have come to their very beginnings in that way, because it's also breath, it's hydrogen and oxygen and things that you can't even see. And in Chinese medicine, how could they say that? They put this character there, and we've translated as if it's always a sword or something. And I don't see it like that at all. I see it's the thing that makes water, hydrogen and oxygen. It's the beginning. It's the very, very beginning of everything. Of course, you start your meridians with that from where they come from, because you put it together. And of course, it's the last thing left after fire that brings you back, fire, earth, metal. It's like left in the soil as the very beginning of possibility. It's the things that can't be broken down any further. And isn't that where we begin from?
When you put it that way, I can see it. There's something basic and essential.
The periodic table. How do you say that 3,000 years ago? With one character, gold. And then we were like, oh, metal makes water. And it's just poorly translated.
Wow. Okay. I'm going to take that and think about it.
I made that up, but I didn't make it up because it's the roots of Chinese medicine.
Well, you said earlier in this conversation that you have to start with imagination.
Absolutely.
Start with imagination and then see how it works.
Yes. Where it can bring us to, how we can expand, how can we be more than? What's possible? What is possible?
So what do you think is next for you? Other than maybe slowing down a bit and sitting by the river a little.
I do feel that I have something that I'm going to try to pass in terms of value. Besides this little lecture that we just heard, there's a little more. And the form of that is something interesting because everybody writes a book, and how many of us buy a book and read it, even if, the memoirs are of the people who I most would love to hear from. And so I've been sitting on that little golden egg a little bit to see how it's going to come out in a way that I feel is valuable to my next generation. And I have a bunch of ideas about that, but it hasn't hatched yet. And it's going to take some time, I believe, unless I get one of those lovely transmissions, which I know if I get a few, my number may be up. But that allows me a little bit more spaciousness. I'm gonna actually still lean both into that and also lean out of that as much as I can and expand my life in directions of whatever it is that we feel the least regrets when we die, as far as having spent enough time raising my grandkids and being all I can be in some other realms.
Well, that sounds pretty wonderful. And I suspect you'll go at it with the same spirit that you went at that paper on acupuncture with. It's hard to get away from essentially who we are.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Holly, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a lovely walk through where you've been and the creativity that you brought to this.
The last 50 years anyway of a piece of how acupuncture has evolved outside of what is so important, which is the structure of kind of like the basics of what we learned in school, because there's something to that. And then the wild road of all the rest of it.
The wild road of all the rest of it.
Yeah.
All right, then. Till next time we meet.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, I knew we were in for a ride when Holly answered, I was in Kabul when I first heard about acupuncture. Probably helps with developing a sense of curiosity when parents take you along on an adventure like the kind that she was on. I really like that part about learning herbs by their contradictions and being attentive to how they could cause trouble. In a way, it's like reverse engineering what kind of function they have. It's a way to understand function through the lens of how an herb dysregulates a body. And stalking someone to help her learn acupuncture at the Chinese bookstore, I do think it helps to put yourself unabashedly in front of what it is that you want. I was going to say this requires courage, and to a degree it does, but at the same time, there's something about letting the universe know that you mean business. It really makes a difference. Holly's thoughts on learning and teaching, they do point in the direction of how we not only keep alive the traditions and methods that have come into our hands, but also how we can advance what we've been given through our experience, and most importantly, helping others to learn.